All right, so 2021 gave us the most Marvel content, most MCU content that we've ever had in a single year. Since the MCU has been a thing, there's never been this many properties released in the same year. A lot of that was because COVID delayed some of the stuff from 2020. But no matter the reason, it was a crazy, jam-packed year of Marvel stories. Not only did we get 4 movies, which is the most we've ever gotten, we also got an introduction to MCU-connected series for the first time ever. The first time this has ever been done with anything, having series connect with the films. Pretty insane. And as hard as this is, today, my plan is to rank all 9 of the movies and series that were released in 2021 from the ones I like least to the ones that I absolutely loved the most. So, let's just jump right into it.
At number 9 is a film that I enjoyed very much, but it didn't give me quite as much as the other properties, and that is ShangChi. ShangChi was a great film and a great beginning, really, to a new era in the MCU. One that I was actually kind of worried about. I was worried that what the MCU would be like after Endgame. I was worried that the series wouldn't work out, and I was worried that I wouldn't like the new characters. I was worried that it just had too much to live up to. But I was perfectly happy with ShangChi. The only part about the film that I could have done without, and it's kind of a big deal, that's why it puts it at the bottom, but that's the ending. I didn't like the dragons. Now look, I enjoyed the humor, I enjoyed the martial arts, the fight choreography, and I enjoyed the characters and the story. I just didn't like the dragon writing in the end. And that, as seemingly small of a nitpick as it is the main reason I have it in last place. I told you, these are all great, but unfortunately, this one did less for me than the other films and series. All right. Now, number 8 is probably going to piss a lot of people off. And while Loki did so much to further the greater MCU storyline by opening up the multiverse, there was one main component of this series that I just couldn't buy into. And that was the Loki-Sylvie relationship. And not just because it was weird, not the concept was weird, of two people that are the same person falling in love with one another, but, I just didn't feel that they had much chemistry. I got pretty bored. Got pretty bored with their story, and since that was like the centerpiece to the series, inevitably, it drops it down near the bottom for me. It was a great series. I loved almost everything about it, except for the relationship. And so, yeah, Loki was great. Very cool ending. We got an introduction to Kang, or at least a version of Kang, a Kang variant. And I rather enjoyed seeing the different Loki variants. I was hoping for a little more time travel, which is one of my favorite things in sci-fi and fantasy and nerddom, geekdom, I guess. But the main thing holding this series back for me was the Loki and Sylvie romance. All right, if I haven't lost you yet, number 7 might change your mind. I don't know. I have at number 7 the animated anthology series What If. And to be honest, I absolutely loved this series. The only reason it's not at the top of the list is the inconsistency. Some episodes were mind-blowing, amazing, like the Doctor Strange episode, the Zombies episode, and several others. But there were a few that really kind of brought the series down a bit, in my opinion, and also, in retrospect. Now, I'm not sure of this, but I kind of feel like it might have been a better series if it was treated like a straight-up anthology and, didn't intertwine the stories and universes by the end. At first, I absolutely loved this idea, but honestly now, looking back, it might have been nice to just have this one series that didn't connect to anything. And if anything wasn't going to connect it to the wider universe, this should have been the series to do it. All right, next up at number 6, we have WandaVision. And I'm sure a lot of you will disagree with this. Um, honestly, it was a hard one to place for me. And it may even just be recency bias. Maybe that's why I have it so low. It was the first series out, and it's been the longest since I've rewatched. But I will say that I loved the premise of the series. I loved the journey through sitcom time that we got to take as an audience, and I loved the week-to-week mystery of the show. The introduction to Catherine Hahn as Agatha, amazing. Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen, fantastic. The only thing that I think was a negative for this show was the finale. I really didn't enjoy the final showdown between Wanda and Agatha. I thought it was pretty lame. And if I'm being honest, and while they did so much, incredibly right, not sticking the landing, unfortunately, was enough to put WandaVision in the bottom half of my rankings. Okay, moving on, number 5. And some of you have to disagree with this. The critic and audience ratings for this film were extremely subpar for an MCU outing. I believe this is probably one of the lowest rated movies of the entire MCU. And while I agree that the film felt very different from the rest of the MCU, it's also kind of what I loved about it. It did feel a little different at times. I've compared it to the DCEU films. It just felt bigger and more grand. It felt darker. I loved almost all the characters in this movie. I felt the film was executed very well. The only thing keeping it from the top spot for me is that I believe some of the casting was a little off. I didn't love Cersei. That's probably the main point. I feel like I probably should have loved her, as she was like the main focus throughout. And if there was a lead character, it was her, and she wasn't my favorite of the bunch. Not even close. She was probably my least favorite character in the movie. But yes, overall, I really enjoyed Eternals. And for me, it falls somewhere right in the middle of everything that came out this year. So for me, it's number 5. All right, number 4. Now we're getting to some of my absolute favorite stuff that I watched this year. And for many of you, this will come as a surprise as well. My number 4 is Black Widow. Right off the rip, this movie grabbed me with that opening sequence that reminded me so much of Americans on FX. That's a show I absolutely adore, and I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't. In addition to that awesome opening, I thought it was a great story, and I thought the action was fantastic, and I think Yelena is a wonderful addition to the MCU and one of my favorite characters to come out of 2021. The only thing I didn't love about the film was, again, the final action sequence, the finale, which, like ShangChi, I think it was too much. The rest of the film felt very grounded, very almost realistic, but when it comes to fighting on falling debris, while falling thousands of feet through the sky, hurtling towards Earth, and several people end up surviving, and not only surviving, but landing relatively unscathed, I just can't suspend my disbelief quite that far. So, again, the ending of this film is what kept it from the top of the list. Now, number 3 was one of my favorite things about this entire year, and I honestly have nothing negative to say about it. And I've gotten a lot of flack for this. Most of the times when I've put up a poll on social media, this series is dead last. Everyone else picks it last, but The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I thought, was a masterpiece, especially considering all the COVID complications with filming and the fact that they had to basically remove an entire storyline from the series. I thought, even with doing that, it still turned out so brilliant. It did exactly what it set out to do, which was tell a badass story, introduce some really cool characters, namely John Walker, who I absolutely loved. But the main thing it did is convince the world and Sam Wilson that he is Captain America. Like I said, most people disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. I get it. It's not as fantastic, it's not as magic, it's not as cosmic as some of the other series, but it does what I love. It tells a grounded, complete story and has some fantastic character moments. All right, listen. number 2 and number 1 on my list are probably interchangeable depending on my mood. Because number 2 came as a complete surprise. I was not expecting this series to be so damn good. But Hawkeye was one of the absolute best things I've seen all year. Jeremy Renner was fantastic. Haley Steinfeld proved to the world that she deserves a place in the MCU. Oh yeah. And the best thing about Black Widow, Yelena shows up. Oh yeah. And we got Vincent fucking D'Onofrio back as Wilson Fisk. Holy shit. Because of that, this series made me go back and rewatch all 3 seasons of Daredevil, 2 seasons of The Punisher, and read the Matt Fraction Hawkeye series. And there, I found out just how much they adapted directly from the comics in this series. Everything from like color scheme to the title card to exact bits of dialogue. This might be the truest and closest comic adaptation in the history of comic book adaptations. Second, maybe only to something like Sin City or 300, which is pretty spot on. Now, as I said, number 2 could likely be interchanged with number 1, but for me, my number 1 and the best MCU property of 2021 is, and I'm sure it's no surprise, Spider-Man No Way Home. I mean, this movie, it did so much. It delivered on everything that it promised without actually promising anything at all. Speculation was through the roof all year, which a lot of times makes for a lot of disappointment when a film is finally released, but this film did not disappoint in any way whatsoever. They did everything right, they did everything we expected, and so much more. With the added twist of the death that affects Peter Parker in this Marvel Cinematic Universe version of the Spider-Man story. And finally, getting to hear that iconic line that we've been waiting for. This film did it all for me. And much like Hawkeye, I can see no real flaws. And the ending has me wondering, what the hell they could possibly do next. Because with the setup that they put in place, I feel like the possibilities are endless. And I hope we get to see Tom Holland continue in the role for at least a couple more films to see where they take his character. All right, guys, that is going to do it for my top 9 MCU films and series of 2021. I hope you enjoyed it, even if you didn't agree with some of my choices. And hey, if you've got a better list, please drop it in the comments below, or you can reach out to me at RealBrettScott on Twitter or Instagram and chat with me over there. I'd love to hear what you guys think. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like it and share it. And if you enjoy videos or podcasts like this, please subscribe to the channel or favorite or follow the podcast. That way you can get all future episodes as soon as they drop. And if you love MCU content, don't forget to go over and subscribe to my podcast, Marvel Plus. You can find that anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Just spell it out, Marvel Plus. All right, guys. Until next time, thanks.